Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and with me, as always, is David Kirkpatrick. How you doing, man?
Doing good. You?
Doing good. We're finally getting into some warmer weather, which is very nice. Which we, to preference that we're recording this in May.
Yes.
You may be listening to this in the fall, and it may be getting chilly. So sorry if our weather analysis is very confusing. But we got another good Kentucky history topic to talk about. Mr. William, or Colonel William Whitley is what I should say.
There you go.
A staple here in Lincoln County,
Yes.
and probably a forgotten fella. As many as we talk about, he's definitely probably a forgotten, important frontiersman. Would you call him a frontiersman?
That's tough. Yes, just because of the time period that he's here. But, he does so much that I know we're going to talk about later, but from his house to some of the positions he holds to just the way he lives his life later on. I mean, he's less in the James Herod, Daniel Boone column, and more in the Isaac Shelby, Ephraim McDowell column. The guys that got here early, but they really established themselves. So we'll give it to him with an asterisk beside
it. Yeah. He was a second waiver, maybe, if you want to, and that's probably the best way to say it. He wasn't really the frontiersman that we think of as James Herod, Daniel Boone, Simon Kenton. He wasn't a first trailblazer. He kind of let the others come blaze the trail, and then he followed up, and then he established himself in many ways when we get down to it, and we'll get into that a little bit later. We got a preference, of course, the William Whitley House, which is a state historic site that you can go and visit. We'll talk about that a little bit more, as well. But a lot of stuff to talk about with Colonel Whitley here. Whitley County is also named after him. Whitley City as well. Right. If you were listening from Whitley County and did not know that, now you do. Or if you just wanted to know it, you know it now. So
and Williamsburg too, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Williamsburg as well. Yeah. So
is that the only county in the state that has a Kentuckian where the county seat's named after him in the county as well? I know we have a county that has after a president, right? but there's
Washington or what? Or
Monroe County has Tompkinsville,
Monroe?
and that was
Okay,
his Veep. But what other county?
Carroll County.
That's right. That's
Carroll
right.
County, and then Carrollton is all named after Charles Carroll from Carrollton.
Yes. Okay. There we go.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the only one I can think of right off the top of my head. But there is a lot of those counties that, like, you have a county, but then another county has the county seat that's also named after that same person. Um,
Right.
uh, Russell County. Then you got Russellville. Um,
Yeah.
that's another topic for another day.
That's another
um,
episode.
yeah. So, but we'll start with the beginning, I guess, with old William Whitley. He was born in 1749 in Augusta County, Virginia, uh, son to an Irish immigrant, Solomon Whitley, and
Mhm.
Elizabeth Barnett. They moved to America from Northern Ireland. So I believe it's first generation. He was a first generation American, um,
Yes.
born here, and so forth. But obviously, those Irish roots or Northern Ireland, uh, very typical, very
Yeah.
typical of the I guess I would say pilgrimage over here. Um, but yeah, pretty good establishment. Go ahead.
It is, and it's surprising. Oh, it always surprises me anyway. There's so many of the Scots Irish and so many of the German population that come over make it as far west as they do. Because if you look at a map of Virginia, it's almost deceiving to see Augusta County. But if you look at Augusta County, in the 1770s, it was massive and extended pretty far west. And it was basically, in their minds, it was the edge of the universe in a sense. There were not a lot of settlements beyond that. So to come from a place like Northern Ireland that rural agricultural, fairly settled though, and end up on
Mhm.
the frontier. I mean, man, what a lifestyle change. You know.
Yeah, very true. And well, you just think about, like you said, that England, that area. I mean, it's very much more settled than the eastern coast of the U.S. at the time, or the colonies.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, and then of course the county. I think about this oftentimes. You have Kentucky that gets divided into three counties, which are massive. They're massive counties, and people are not even closely inhabiting all those places. So it's a bit more very rural, I guess, to say it
And
as
some of those
opposed to.
cases that came up, if you have like a capital punishment case that has to be decided in Williamsburg, Virginia. I mean, I cannot imagine the poor sheriff or deputy that is taking an alleged murderer, and you have to march them from central Kentucky to Williamsburg. I mean, if the Indians don't kill you in the process, this guy's going to break loose and do it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a thesis in that somewhere because it's a very wild and woolly time and it's a dangerous place.
Well, you think about all those prisoners that, well, you've seen it in movies where you know, get the handcuffs off me. I can help. And
Yeah.
that probably happened a lot
Yes.
during an attack or a raid. But you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. Thing is about William Whitley is when you look at his early life, not as much is really documented, I guess, about it. There's just not a lot about his youth and so forth. So we kind of got to skip over a lot of his things, and just a few references if you want to. Of course, the Kentucky Encyclopedia has
Right.
a has a section out about him, which live and die by the Kentucky Encyclopedia. Um,
Absolutely.
there's also a book called, I believe it's called Kentucky Heroes or Kentucky Soldiers, maybe, and it has a little bit about William Whitley in it as well. Um, the Lincoln County Historical Society, Lincoln County History book. It has quite a bit about William Whitley in it as well. Um, and I mean, you can go to Crowd Orchard and find out a lot about him as well, or just go to the William Whitley House and you'll get plenty. So that's some things. Like I said, not as much about his youth, but something
Right.
worth kind of mentioning. There's stuff out there, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, it's like you say though, it's just not as interesting. And another thing that separates him from the Daniel Boones and the James Harrods of the world, those guys are moving backwards and forwards. If you read a biography on one of them, Boone's in Pennsylvania, and then he's in Virginia for a little bit, and he's in North Carolina. Their youth is filled with this backwoods, traveling around. And same with Herod. he stays primarily in Pennsylvania, but at one point when he's a child, the family has to leave their home. It's on fire. They move to different counties. Whitley, not so much. The family's in Augusta County. They stay there. He gets married there. And so if you're not going to be, in the deed books or on the tax records, there's not a lot of ways to track you down. So I'm sure
Yeah.
that's the lifestyle I would prefer as opposed to moving from Pennsylvania to the backwoods of North Carolina. But it doesn't make for exciting writing, I think.
No, no, that's very true, and that does, sometimes not being traced is not a bad thing.
That's right.
Yeah. So, we're talking about the time that, Boonesboro, um, Fort Harrod, and Fort Logan, all kind of already been established. 1775, uh, through those times, that's kind of like we said, this is kind of the second wave. So William Whitley comes over though through the Wilderness Trail with Benjamin Logan, and at a time he does stay at Fort Logan. He begins to build his own little station near Crab Orchard, and again, remind everybody, a station is basically just kind of a small, compact fort. And if you look at some older maps of Lincoln County, there is Whitley Station is marked down, so you kind of see, and that was kind of obviously the plan. He came over here to set up his station, then eventually build his house. Um, um, but then he does, of course, as many of them did, go back to Virginia to get his family and so forth. Now, William Whitley, though, did not build his own house. And that's when we kind of get a bit of another break and a difference. Um, think about Benjamin Logan, James Harrod, Daniel Boone, outdoors backwoodsmen in a way. Benjamin Logan, not so much
Right.
as Harrod and Boone. Um, but William Whitley was a bit more of a socialite, a bit more of a um, high society man, I guess, if you want to say it that way. Um, and I don't know, maybe what is there any record of what his family did before, like
Ooh,
besides just
yeah,
farming
that's
and stuff? I would
not.
assume that they had to have some wealth at some
Yeah,
point.
I think they got to Augusta County fairly early on. And again, the benefit of not moving around is if you have land in the West, every year that goes by, it increases in value. So I
Mhm,
would assume that the benefit of having land and not having a piece of worn out, tobacco drained land in the tidewater regions of Virginia, some of those lands and those farms that just get overworked. I think that helps probably quite a bit. I've never read anything about his family other than farming, but I know that he's obviously educated. He can read and write because at some point, I know we'll talk about this. He serves in the legislature for a term,
mhm,
so he's an educated guy. But yeah, when he arrives in Kentucky, he's determined to set up a home. He comes with a wife. He ends up they have 11 children, I think, altogether.
mhm. Yep.
But when he comes, he has two young daughters, both under the age of 5, and a wife. And it was abundantly clear that he wanted civilization as soon as possible. And so, yeah, you mentioned the house, and I know you can describe that in greater detail than I can. But man, when he builds that, it's not a log cabin.
Exactly, exactly. It is not a log cabin. So yeah, so they come over, and while their house is being constructed, he stays at Fort Harrod,
Hmm.
um, and that's when they have their third child there. Um,
Yeah.
and he actually hires somebody, Joseph Lewis, to build his house. Um, we're a little bit of speculation. I would assume, and I'm pretty sure that they probably had some slaves that helped that as well. There's really no documentation or anything. I just highly doubt that this guy Joseph Lewis is out there building this house by himself
Yeah.
with Native American attacks, and so forth going on. I mean, this is it's not an easy task, and not only is it just building a log cabin, this is a full on house. This is a brick house, a big house for the
The first
time,
brick house.
and because yes, the first brick house. So it is a it is a accomplishment, really, to say it in the least. It's a pretty big accomplishment. I'm trying to think of something to compare it to, modern time wise. Um, you know, I'm gonna say maybe creating the first electric car. That's kind of a big deal. Um,
Yeah.
going to the moon, obviously, but I don't know if this would be as big as going to the moon. I mean, uh, but
You know, it's an interesting comparison though, because one of the biggest challenges to space travel is the cost of getting stuff from here to there. And if you read, there's a book called Running Mad for Kentucky where they talk about early eyewitness accounts of Boonesboro and Harrodsburg. And one of the things they mention about Harrodsburg is all these cabins exist with wood pegs rather than the nails, iron nails, because iron is so scarce. It takes a lot to get that over the mountains. And if you're in a brick house, you're not holding stuff together with wood pegs. And you think those bricks had to be manufactured locally. The timber was locally sourced. The stone for the foundation was cut, and you have honest to goodness metal inside that house and glass. It was a
yeah.
status symbol.
Yeah, yeah, that's another good point. It was a status symbol for sure. For those people who, it's a Federalist style house.
Right.
That's the type. You know, I don't know much about the different. Is a Gregorian style house? Is that another kind of style of house?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
And similar to the same time period. And of course, Federalists think of box with no porch.
yeah,
Beautiful brick home, but they're very
yeah,
flat. So,
yeah, yeah. So a pretty big deal. It was built in. Um, Pretty much, I think it took 4 years to build. So from about 1782 to 1786 is when it was built. And again, it was the first brick house west of the. I always say the Appalachians, but I guess it's the Alleghenies, right? Is that the correct term?
I always say Appalachian. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Allegheny.
yeah,
The Allegheny sounds more impressive because technically they're slightly farther east. They're part of the
yeah,
but I say Appalachian too. So
yeah,
we'll roll with
well,
that.
yeah, I agree. So yeah, that's a pretty big deal, pretty big statement, I guess. But more to follow. That's the thing. Even around here, everybody knows of William Whitley, first house, first brick house, and so forth. But he was a bit more than that. I mean,
Yeah.
he established. I mean, Crab Orchard, pretty much the town that I live in currently, and have been beside my entire life. He is pretty much what I would call the founder of Crab Orchard, and he established himself and more, if you want to say it that way. Like we said, he's a bit of a high society man. So not only did he work to get all this material and get this, you'll build this kind of grand house. You
Right.
know, he liked all the high social things too. He liked fox hunting, which was a game for the rich,
Yeah.
trapping, so forth. He had big meals, big festivals, big festivities, whatever you want to say. You try to think of back in that time what they did for fun, horse racing, those sorts of things, shooting competitions,
Right.
um, you name it. He was part of it, or he
Oh
wanted it
yeah.
happening.
And if you're building a house that size, I mean, it's massively expensive to keep up a house that size, even back then, because you didn't have electricity bills, but you got candles and you get kerosene lamps, that kind of thing. So if you're building a house of that size, your purpose in doing that is to entertain, and that's why like people like Washington and Jefferson, who build Mount Vernon and Monticello, they build these places that are massive, but they have great rooms where people can come because it's around these dinner tables during the early republic that you're going to make changes or you're going to use your influence. And so, yeah, when Whitley's building this, he's doing it with an eye towards entertaining. But like you say, he's a lot more than that too, because while that's being built, the guy is a constant soldier, which is a bit of a paradox because these aren't the nice battlefields of Europe with neat uniforms and rows of soldiers. This is backwood military fighting.
Yes, and which brings us to another part of his dynamic because I think he was a little he was a he had a little bit of a craziness in him as well. To
Right.
say it that way, because so he moves up, comes to Kentucky and builds a station, builds his house, and of course this is all during the time Native American attacks are um, you know uh, constant to an extent.
Right.
One of the things that is said that when he first came over here and first experienced somebody getting scalped and stuff, he was just so appalled by it or just like so taken back. This was just such a treacherous, barbarous thing that he could not, like, it really bothered him. And
Right.
with that being said, guess what? The one thing he always made sure he did if he was to kill a Native American, scalp them.
Yes.
So
With the
it
famous
was
scalp.
yeah, it was one of those. It's one of those things like he was so appalled by it, but yet he jumped right in and did it. And maybe it was a retaliation thing, something to that nature that made him be so enthused about that about I guess
Mm.
doing that as well. But yeah, bit of a I don't really know. That doesn't make a lot of sense, I guess.
Yeah, it's very gory. And you think too, if it made such an impression on him, maybe the intent, and of course it's all speculation, but maybe the intent is if you can make people afraid of you enough, that is an asset when you're on the battlefield. And so it may have been, like you said, a psychological thing that he doesn't like it, but if this is the way the game is played, he's going to be ruthless at it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good point. So many things happen there. I mean, we could talk about the other aspect of this. So William Whitley gets established here. He has a fort, a station, or he has a station, a house. But
Mm.
he kind of becomes the centerpiece of, if you want to call it, the Minutemen or the militia of the area. You
Yeah,
know, if there's wind of a raid to come, he's saddling up and he's headed to help out or defend whoever it may be. Um, we got there's one story where there's an area that the Noakes family had settled in real close to Whitley's house, and some Native Americans had raided, took a child, and they shot an older son or something, and of course the Noakes people there who live probably a few miles from the William Whitley house,
right.
their first instinct is send somebody to Whitley. We need reinforcements, and of course within time he shows up with cavalry, and they go on a hunt for the Native Americans and the captives. Um, in that sense, I do believe they found the girl that was but I think the Native Americans had abandoned the
Mm.
girl. Um, that's one incident, and
Oh, yeah.
but there's more.
Yeah, he's with George Rogers Clark when he travels west,
Mhm.
from Louisville to attack forts to beat the British out in the Revolution. He's there, and I think there's some battling in 1779 that Whitley's present for. Is he at Boonesboro on his way to Boonesboro?
During the siege or Blue
Yes.
Licks, or which one are you talking about?
Well, I know he's on his way to the Blue Licks, and if they had waited for those Lincoln County boys, it probably would have turned out different. Um, but I thought maybe he was. I might be misremembering that, but he was someone involved in so much.
Mhm. I'm sure there was. I'm sure he ma- there. I'm sure at some point he was at Boonesboro for sure, and then
Mm,
I'm sure he participated. I mean, like I said, he was he was a fighter, a big time fighter. I
yeah.
mean, ready to go. Um, he another incident. I believe his daughter was it well, like it was his daughter's house and his son-in-law. They waited. The Native Americans had waited for his son-in-law to leave, and they swarmed in, and like his daughter was underneath the bed, like trying to fight them off, but and she was able to hold them off long enough for William and cavalry to come and help, and um, the Native Americans were scared off, and they ended up leaving or weren't able to do anything. Like I said, he had 11 kids. Um,
Right.
but you want to keep going on about his soldiering because since we are talking about that, there is one big thing that we got to mention as far as his escapades. So we'll fast forward a little bit. I mean, this is later in his life. If you think about it, his
Mm,
age. This is 1813, Battle of the Thames. We've
right.
talked about that before. He was born in 1749. So
Hmm.
64. He was be 64
Before.
years old.
Yeah.
Whew, going to battle with Isaac Shelby, right?
Right. Again, that parallel exists again. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
I think that what is the purpose? I mean, you're 64 years old. I get the purpose, but in all honesty,
no, no,
there are men who are younger than you. There are men who are faster than you. There are probably men who are better shots than you are. And I attribute it purely to a sense of honor. I mean, the year before we talked about the River Raisin also, that defeat, that disgrace. why do you sign up to go at 64 years old when you, if anybody has done their part to keep Kentucky safe, is William
Yep.
Whitley. And he feels a sense of duty and he mounts and he rides off.
Yeah, but that's I mean that's the best way to I mean, what else does he have to prove? I mean, honestly, like, what does he have to prove at all? No
Right?
one's gonna be like, well, he battled for years and years and settled this land, but you know what? He didn't go and fight at the Battle of the Thames. What a loser, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, right.
But anyway, he goes to the Battle of Thames and he is killed in battle killed in the Battle of the Thames. Um, which again, he was very old, but I'm sure it was maybe just his calling, what he thought he needed to do. Um, Now, a big side note, and this is huge speculation, and if I had to say, is this true or not, I would probably say no. But it is rumored that he is the one who killed the Shawnee chief Tecumseh.
Right,
Now, of course, we have no idea to know if that's true. The other more popular rumor is Richard Minton Johnson killed
right,
Tecumseh. Um, and the reason I doubt this one so much is it comes from his daughter. I think it was his daughter's journal, maybe even
yeah,
that says but his daughter wasn't there. Um,
right,
I don't know how she would know unless the people that brought his gun back to her and stuff that if that's what they said, but it's
yeah.
speculation.
And I can see that too. Not that anybody would purposely be dishonest, but if you're carrying news like that back to a family member, it's a sense of grief. And the one thing you always want to convey is that it wasn't in vain. That they sacrificed their life.
Mhm.
And I can see someone getting a little liberal in their description, embellishing some. But the other thing too, I would love it to be Whitley personally. It's handy for Richard Johnson because he's got political aspirations. He ends up being vice president.
Yeah.
But the thing that makes me doubt Whitley is, he's on horseback and he is part of the forlorn hope. So not to rehash the Thames, but the British are in nice, neat rows on this side. The Indians are in a swamp and they're embedded there behind trees and things. So in order to draw the fire of the Indians, they can see where they are. They send a small group of horsemen out, and once the Indians have fired, they can tell by the musket flashes where to attack. Whitley is leading that charge, and all but one of those men are killed at some point during the battle. Most of them as soon as that volley comes out of the trees. So if he did, he had to be very lucky to survive all of that, then dismount because most of the fighting in the swamp, even though it was done by cavalrymen, it was done on foot. He would have had to survive this volley of musket balls by him, dismount at 64 years old, and then wade into a swamp. So
it's
it's possible, but probably not.
but yeah, that's and you can I mean, and you could see it. I mean, it makes sense that like say they bring, hey, here's your father's gun. He fought valiantly, he charged the enemy in bravery. The great Shawnee chief Tecumseh was killed. We don't know who could have killed him. I could see them very well being, trying to make it as best as possible. But you know, if I was betting, I would not bet for
Yeah,
Whitley on that one. But again, showing his bravery. Why in the world does he say, you know what? I'll volunteer. I'll be the one who leads this
right.
inevitable, death sentence, or the forlorn hope is probably the best description, or is one of the best uh, military terms, I guess, or battle terms. I think whenever I hear that, I'm like, poor fellas.
It doesn't sound like the kind of thing that would garner many volunteers. Who wants to volunteer for the hopeless situation? I mean, but it was again, it was a way to show that you were willing to sacrifice yourself, and a lot of guys did it, but not many in their 60s. So
Yeah, and maybe that was maybe that was just his thing. He wanted to go out on the field of glory.
yeah,
Um,
and
I
your
think
children are grown. And is Esther
yeah,
still alive? His wife Esther.
that is a good question. I believe so. I
Okay, I
believe
thought
she
so
doesn't
too.
die till later.
I
A
think
little
she
bit later
dies
after he does.
the 30s or something. Or I thought,
Mhm.
if memory serves right,
Yeah,
she lived a long time after him. So you have a wife at home, but your children are grown for the most part.
yeah.
And maybe you look at the guys
Reputation is
next to you.
set.
Yeah,
You know, So yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound smart to me, but I guess for him it was probably the way he wanted to go.
And if anybody would have
Uh,
understood, it's Esther, because she at one point gets credit for there's a raid at some point, and she raises the men herself because he's out, and then they're ready to go when he gets back to lead them. So she had a reputation for being pretty tough herself.
well, let's go ahead and we can talk about her just a little more too, because again, like we said, he was big time entertaining, and this is another. It kind of doesn't make as much sense, but it's the time, and I guess it's not for us to understand really, but they entertain Native Americans as well, and they would come and have competitions and so forth. Um, and just so people may know, when it came to these kind of sporting events, shooting competitions or so forth, Native Americans were very prideful. And you think about Daniel Boone. Daniel Boone was always knew how to kind of ride the pride of the Native Americans. Not do too good so that they are offended, but not also do so bad that they don't give you any credit.
Yeah,
However,
good,
go
good
ahead.
enough to be useful, but not good
Yes.
enough to be a threat.
Yes, yeah. But at one of these events, William Whitley brought out Esther, and Esther Whitley was a very good shot, and I'm pretty sure during these events, when she came out there and would shoot, and like it was kind of oh shoot, what am I calling uh, a bluff. Shoot against my wife, shoot against my wife, and of course the Native Americans were very prideful. It's like, this is, yes, of course, we will win, and then she would end up beating some of them, and it didn't, nothing. I guess no bloodshed was ever happened, but it was one of those things that uh, I'm sure William got a lot of entertainment out of it. But
Oh, I would imagine. I would say wagers were probably placed at one point with other settlers, if not the Native Americans. And
yeah, yeah, yeah. We're going to stop it right there with our discussion about William Whitley. We again thank David for coming on and joining us and adding to the conversation. And also thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We're always seeking to find more Kentucky history so we can bring it to you. the viewers, the listeners. We want all the stories and all the events from Kentucky's great history to be told and shared everywhere.